Recent reports indicate that a whopping 95% of enterprise AI pilot programs are failing to deliver meaningful revenue growth. We're in a bubble where hype outstrips reality. Too many founders are building AI features, chatbots, automations from prompts, as if layering bolt-ons to old playbooks is going to suddenly make a difference. They won't. They're simply paving the cow path. I think the winners are not just sprinkling AI a little on top of whatever they were doing before, they're rebuilding their revenue architecture around AI-first models. How do you engineer real systematic growth when AI changes every assumption about sales and marketing? How do sales and marketing leaders move from pilot to production, from possibility to profit? I'm Tom Chavez, and my guest today is Mark Roberge, co-founder at Stage 2 Capital, former founding chief revenue officer at HubSpot, and now a lecturer at the Harvard Business School. He's the mind behind the science of scaling and has helped take companies from 0 to 100 million and beyond. Mark's here to give us his perspective on how data-driven and AI techniques change the game for modern sales and marketing leaders. Mark, great to have you.
Thanks, Tom. Always great to collaborate with you.
Well, let's chop it up. Let's just jump right in here, Mark.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could just back it up a little bit. Tell us about your professional journey. What brought you to HubSpot in those early days as founding CRO?
Yeah. Come pretty Buddhist, Tom. I'm sure that's not the answer you were expecting, because as I reflect on every professional win I had that's on my resume, I did not proactively pursue any of them, including going to HubSpot.
Brilliant.
Like I was an engineer, wrote code early part of my career, went to MIT, had this quant background, fell in love with startups at 23, during business school, started a bunch of them, got funding for one, was running one after I didn't go through the recruiting process. And a year later, I didn't find product market fit, had $100,000 in loans. Schools were cheaper back then. That's like a year now.
I love it.
And I was, my first child was born that January, found out we were having our second child 4 months later. I mean, it was stressful. Like I knew and I was working with the HubSpot with Brian and Dharmesh one day a week. And they were like, had no idea that stuff was going on. And Brian took me to a Red Sox game. He had like front row tickets. He's always been a huge fan. I think he's a part owner now, actually. And he was like, hey, I just got a term sheet from General Catalyst. We're going to like scale. You've been selling this thing one day a week. Like, why don't you just quit your startup and like come on board? And I was like, obviously played it cool as a negotiator. I was like, oh, my startup's doing great. My life's perfectly great right now. And I was like, literally like everything was falling apart for me. And I negotiated a deal and came on. I literally thought I'd have like flex salary for 4 months and get my life together and figure out what to do next. And then 9 years later, we're ringing the bell on the New York Stock Exchange. And it's like, again, step number one of many, from writing a book to joining Harvard to starting Stage 2 Capital. I did not intend to do any of those. They were things that fell on my lap, and God forbid I had an open mind at that moment and decided to try them. And that's what happened.
I love it, Mark. Thanks for sharing. You know, it's funny because I think sometimes people will look at you, and I know that this happens with me, and they say, oh my gosh, what a perfectly planned strategy.
Oh, yeah.
You nailed it.
Yeah, I have to tell my students all the time, I'm like, well, I don't know what to say to you there. It's not like you can like go in a cave in India and just sit there and wait. But I
Yeah,
think the lesson is like, have your plan. We're all A-type people, but just be open-minded. And like, just every time an opportunity surfaces that you weren't expecting, do some reflection. Ask yourself if your unique gifts are called to do that, and see if you can run an experiment to see if there's some energy there.
I love these stories. Since you shared yours, I'll give you
Yeah, that'd be awesome, Tom. I'd
mine.
love to hear it.
So in my 20s, I was zigging and zagging. There was no like tight little plan. A
Yeah.
period of my life, I wanted to be a professional musician, so I'm playing in bands and trying to get that out of my
What
system.
instrument?
I play keyboards.
Sick.
And so I have these two older brothers, one of those in finance, the other's in management consulting. They see me just like this
Yeah.
dissolute.
And mom and dad are like, oh, Tom,
Oh
oh,
my God,
Tom.
Tommy, you're going to have what's coming into your life. And so I
That's
interview
awesome.
at a management consultancy in San Francisco in the financial district. I walk in to this soulless skyscraper. I
Oh
walk out,
God.
I'm pretty sure I bombed it. I look up at the skyscraper and I say, "Nah." Just not, and I
That
just
sounded like a Dan Brown novel. That was amazing.
and
So
so
good.
everything was
So
just
good.
process of elimination, really.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
got my first company funded, and you're talking about the posturing and the negotiating and how, you're on the knife's edge just hanging on. I remember I charged up $85,000 of credit cards,
Oh,
money that I did not have, no
right.
job. And then we get the company funded. And Mark, you can't imagine my shock when they told me, hey, listen, we're going to pay you $120,000. And I just
Yeah.
about passed out like, wait,
Right.
hold on.
To do
You're,
that.
you're going to pay me? I should
Yeah.
be paying you.
Right. It's insane. It's funny because, like, I think back then, Tom, that felt like real like a different type of entrepreneurship where you put it all on the line. And sometimes I feel like I wonder if like the stereotype of entrepreneurs comes from that, whether it's a combination of like knowing that if I don't make this work, I'm gonna have to go to that soulless job and how painful that would be, and like the conviction and energy that brings to you, or the reason why you have folks who are kind of like socially awkward, I guess, at times. Like they're just like you always hear these things, right? These people who are like don't blend in society well and they sometimes become the best entrepreneurs, probably because like the alternative is like not good.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like you have to make this work, like so it's just I don't know. There's something in there.
I remember that moment, Mark, at that first company where I just realized, holy cow, I'm completely unemployable.
Exactly. That's
I
what
really need to make this
and
work.
founders out there, you're not. Every CEO thinks that. Don't keep running your walking zombie just because you feel that. There's plenty of places we love. That's an amazing reason why the US, has continued its power position and is because of our um receptiveness to failure that other cultures don't have. And so like I remember when I joined HubSpot, David Skock, our Series B investor from Matrix, held me in a higher regard because I had failed as an entrepreneur. That's just like an amazing cultural aspect that we have here in the US that don't take for granted that other countries don't have.
Absolutely. That's right. If that happens in the old world, everyone's gossiping and talking about, oh my gosh, so and so, did you hear that their company failed? Here in
Right.
Silicon Valley, you're just getting started. That's a badge of
No.
courage.
In fact, the VCs that backed you on the failed one will probably back you on the next one. It's just about failing well. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Hey, well, let's switch gears,
Mhm.
Mark, and we're going to turn our attention to AI. So, a lot of founders these days claim they're AI first, but it strikes me that a lot of them are just executing old sales playbooks, from olden times. And so I'm wondering if you could share a perspective. You've been at this all the way through the before and the after. Can you share a perspective on what tried and true methods from sales and marketing carry forward in the AI era? And then what needs to be blown up and put back together again?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really important question, Tom. And I'm gonna have to like set it up a little bit, just to give a foundation. So after I left HubSpot, joined the faculty at Harvard Business School, I had about 5 years where I was just like doing startup work, independent, angel investor, independent board member. Basically picked one company a day, a quarter to spend a day a week with and like help them hire their first reps, seed investments from those that backed HubSpot, from General Catalyst, was Sequoia, whatever. Did like 15 or 20 of them. There was an IPO, there was a couple $1 billion exits, there was a bunch of bankruptcies. So it was like first time in my career where I can like reflect and pattern recognize. And since I've started Stage 2 Capital, where you're an LP, as is 1,000 other awesome sales and marketing leaders, and we'd made like 100 investments through that vehicle. And I have found that the cause of the um, unnecessary failure is usually the incorrect decision on when to scale revenue and how fast. And that has birthed my most recent work, The Science of Scaling. That is actually just finished the manager. I have to do the final review is tomorrow. I have to, after this thing, I'm reading again for 6 hours. to submit it. It'll hit the bookshelves in February. I think it's all up for pre-order. 100% of the proceeds go to mental health and McLean Hospital. And so that's just a methodology to help you as a founder or board calculate when you're ready to scale and how fast using your own data. Okay. So I had to do a lot of reflection on like, what of these principles change in addition to like hiring reps, scaling, et cetera, with AI. And a lot of the underlying ones remain, but in general, to your point, this gets compressed and more can be done in sequence. Okay. So the other framing I'll explain is I do think it's hard to predict what will happen with AI because it's hard to predict the timing of like extraction or abstraction away from today's point of work, how far it will go, when. So like I'll give an example. Like if you're a toy manufacturer, like if I think the first abstraction is you use AI to support you through the different stages of manufacturing a toy. Like let's do market research, customer research, profitability, manufacturing design, blah, blah. It's just there helping us. The second abstraction might be it actually just does the whole thing, like create a toy. And the third abstraction might be like, well, a toy is supposed to create like entertainment for kids. So create an idea for entertainment for kids and go make a profitable business. Like there's different levels of abstraction. It's like, when does that happen and how far? And so I think there's 4 phases within go to market of that abstraction. I think we're in the midst of the first phase, and that is um like supporting the rep so that they maximize their time with customers. Today, we often call that selling time. And I actually looked it up this morning as I was thinking about my chat with you. The average selling time of a sales org today is 25%. Right. So 25% of a salesperson's week is spent with a customer and 75% is spent doing other things. Meeting with the manager, forecast, update CRM, prepare for meeting, find new accounts to call, devise outreach, blah, blah, blah. I think like that can easily go from 25% to 75% in the next 2 years. So that will triple productivity right there, just by that simple move. Okay. So that's the first phase is just like that, just doing that. Now the specifics in there to walk you through is like, all right, the first phase of like a customer journey or go-to-market system design is defining your ideal customer profile. Like what market do you work in? Most people make a mistake of defining that based on where the lowest CAC exists and the most demand. That's incorrect, in my opinion. You need to define your ICP on where you can create customer value uniquely. So it's like more about retention than it is CAC. And that's that doesn't change in a post AI era. What does change is we typically have to like refine our ICP every quarter at best because it's such a computational intense exercise of like segmentation and where is it and what's the product gaps, whatever. That can be done every day with AI. You're like, hey, congrats. You guys just made a breakthrough of the product yesterday and our TAM has expanded by 10%. This is the new definition. And it can be like so complex in terms of segmentation. It's not just like enterprise, mid-market, SMB, US, Europe, Asia. It's like super complex. Okay. So that's one that we're on the verge of. The second one would be once your ICP expands, you figure out which accounts you can target. And it's like, we take that for granted today. It's like, okay, here comes the next quarter. We have like 17 SDRs and 40 salespeople, and we have capacity to go after 120 new accounts this quarter. Guess who makes that decision? A 22-year-old SDR. They go on Google, like they go do the research, whatever. Maybe marketing does it, but like that's an AI decision. It's like, hey, I just in the last 5 seconds, I just analyzed 57,000 companies.
Yeah.
And these are the 120 you need to go after.
Right.
Awesome.
And that's happening in seconds, or it should
Second.
not
And
more.
just like it all happens automatically. You don't even think about it because then what it does after that is like, okay, now that I found the account, here's account Acme Corp is one of them. Okay. Here's the 12 people that are related to the decision-making unit. Here's the 12 people that matter. Here's the CIO, here's the business unit leader, here's the end user, and so these are who they are. And now I'm going to craft personalized outreaches to get their attention. That's unique to their role. Because The business unit leader cares about the gross margin of that business. The end user cares about saving time. The CIO cares about that it's secure and a roadmap, and the CFO cares about the ROI. So I'm gonna like devise all that. And today I can have a human review it and send it out, whatever. But over time, I'll get pretty good, much better than a 22 of SDR. Um, and then I booked the meeting, and now it's like I have an AI helping me execute the meeting and the whole sales process perfectly. So there's this awesome company, Letter AI, that's doing this. And essentially, what you do is I just booked a meeting with the director of marketing at Genzyme tomorrow. Okay. So normally I have to do all this research. I have to talk to my manager about how to approach it. Maybe my manager has time to do that. Maybe they don't. Now what I do is I just go into the product, which is already pre-trained with my battle cards, my product, my sales methodology, everything. And I just say, it looks at my calendar, it's like, oh, great, you got a meeting with Betsy at Genzyme tomorrow. So it reads everything about Genzyme and everything about Betsy. And it basically crafts like my first meeting plan that's customized to them. And then it spins up a buyer AI agent of Betsy. So I can practice. I don't have to wait for my manager. I can just be like, all right, cool, let's try it. And it says, hey, that was pretty good, Tom, but like, here's what you should try differently, blah, blah, blah. And then it comes to the meeting with me, either as like a side chat bot or it's actually on the call with me as an agent. And as Betsy talks and we're no longer making assumptions and we find stuff out, it's learning and helping me. Like, you should ask this question next, or here's a use case you should talk about, or here's a case study you might mention. And then after the meeting, it obviously updates the CRM, updates the forecast, updates the the account plan for what our next steps should be, et cetera. And then also updates my skill plan. It's like, Mark, like, good job, but you're still a 3.7 out of 10 on sense of urgency development. And what your next Uber ride, if you have 7 minutes, you should watch this video because like that's where you're falling short. So like that's gonna happen like this year. And then the final piece is like the forecasting and that is all about like owning the point of work, not the system of record anymore. So like we got this awesome company, we have Momentum AI that's like crushing this right now. And it's just like, that we have spent so much energy on forecasting and deal reviews, and that all goes away. Right. So that's like the first phase. The second phase is the agent replaces the seller. And the third phase is the agent replaces the buyer. And then the fourth phase is probably like functional utopia where like there's blurredness between product, marketing, sales, customers. It's all like one thing, right? So potentially, I have
Right.
less conviction about the later phases, but I have quite a bit of conviction on
Yeah.
the first phase. That
No,
makes sense,
listen,
Tom?
that's a really compelling conception, Mark. And yeah, the first abstraction layer you mentioned probably happens in the coming year or
I
two or
think so. I think last year we had huge breakthroughs on R&D and coding. I
yeah.
think this is like the next 4 quarters we'll have those breakthroughs on the go-to-market side.
Well, and so, something you're getting at, Mark, and I want to unpack is, what you gave us there is an end-to-end sort of dirt to dinner
Yeah.
conception, right?
Yes.
And it strikes me that, there are a lot of entrepreneurs and companies out there that are presenting features masquerading as products, products masquerading as companies. What you described again is this end-to-end all-in-one approach. And it's inspiring. By the way, I have to say on a sidebar, a bit of a concern I've had about YC, at least from my vantage point, is that in their desire for velocity and results, which is wonderful,
Yeah.
um,
And by the
you
way, bow down to YC. I mean,
big ups.
friggin' results, right? But like no one's perfect, so go ahead.
It's an amazing model because
Exactly.
by the
Right.
law of large numbers, there's some
Crazy.
Airbnbs and Stripes and so on
Totally.
that are going to come out of it. But what we've seen with some of the folks that we talk to who come from that school of thought is I just need one trick. I need one gimmick. I need one thing. And then when I get, because in the urgency that they create, which again is a good thing, the potential hazard is sort of undernourishing
Totally.
an end-to-end view. So
Totally.
I wonder, when you're talking to entrepreneurs, what mindset do you try to instill with founders to prevent that kind of feature first thinking?
I push them moat. Like I push them moat hard, right? It's like, and I help them really understand and differentiate between a temporary moat and a sustainable moat. Because you're absolutely right, Tom. It's like, hey, so anyway, like, what's your barrier to entry? And like, well, we have this awesome feature. And so my next provocative question is like, All right, so like, cool, it works. You start winning all these deals. And then competitor A obviously finds out and they build a feature. Then what? We build the next feature. It's like, right, I guess it's like question is like, how long would it take them? If the answer is 3 months, it's not, it's a temporary moat. If the answer is 10 years, then it's a probably a, a sustainable moat. The other question that I asked to help provoke this is, I'm like, all right, here's the deal. Like, cool company, great stuff, whatever. Um, this is going to happen, by the way, folks. Like, if you go from 1 to 5 million to 20 over the next 3 years, like you're telling me, incumbent X is going to find out. And they're probably going to put 50 engineers in a room and say, kill your company. Reverse engineer what they have, integrate in the product, and sell for. That's what at HubSpot, like Salesforce bought Exact Target, which owned Pardot, a direct competitor, and they integrated in the platform and sold it for $1 a year. This happens. How do you still win? That sequencing helps the entrepreneur think about feature versus product, defensible modes, temporary modes versus sustainable modes.
So is there a taxonomy of sustainable moats? Mark, how do you think
Michael
about
Porter has the best one from like 50 years ago
mm,
in the
mm.
70s. He was a famous HBS professor, started the monitor group that, and you can just read his work. And I've done some speeches. I've actually written this up. If you Google my name and sustainable modes, I've taken his 1970s work and translated it into B2B software for today. And because he talks about brand and like we don't really talk about brand as a sustainable mode, but the way we do talk about it is category creation, right? And so like, so let me just talk about some like sustainable moats in this era in AI in some so I think there is actually a really good brand moat right now, and I'd love your opinion on this, Tom. As I look across all the startups that are happening right now, and I ask myself, who do I have the most conviction that they survive the next 10 years, that they really are a breakout company? Um, it's tricky. Then in a note that I don't do a lot of work in the infrastructure layer, so I'm going to leave like OpenAI and those folks out. I just don't do that much work there. I'm more at the application layer. Um, what's interesting right now is like not only do these application layer companies, the typical risk they have is the incumbents. Like how do you beat them? Now you have the LLMs integrating up. Yeah, I think Cursor's a great example. It's like I think Claude's been eaten in a bit. Like Cursor's like a pony boy of like amazing application layer, AI native tech. But that happens to be like such a big problem around just like code development that like that becomes interesting to Anthropic. And so many of them are at risk of the LLMs integrating up in addition to, the GitHubs of the world or whatever trying to defend their positions. So that's tricky. I also feel like when I look at I feel like in the decision-making units of a lot of these buyers, the CTO and CIO have come back to the forefront of the decision power. I think like in the 80s and 90s, they were the main decision maker on anything software related because they had to like set up the servers, put the floppy disk in, install it, maintain it. So they kind of had the end call. And as we moved to the cloud, they became almost a servant function. They'll bring your own app, bring your own device mentality, like, hey, 22 SDR, if you want to use a cool tool, I'll make it happen. And that led to this, like application sprawl, data everywhere. We can't get insights to work. And now we've shifted to like, hey, we all need an AI explorer for our company. That's the CIO's job, CTO's. It's like, you are in charge of this. And I kind of think, especially for tech companies, they're like, screw the functional layer. Let me just put everything in Databricks in a data lake, and let me just use LLMs where I can, and or use like horizontal tools. But like, so there's a lot of questions. Never mind all the hype and the overinvestment, and all this other stuff that's happening. Like, that's scary. But where I do have the most like conviction is like the vertical AI and non-verticals. Because I don't think the CTOs of like hospitals, banks, law firms, manufacturing plants think that way. I don't think they're like, let's build this on the LLM. I think they're just like, prove to me that you have gone through HIPAA compliance. Prove to me that you're SOX compliant. Prove to me that you can abide by like, whatever compliance complexes I have from industry. And I'll just go with you. And that's a little bit like a brand moat. It's like reputational moat, so that's one example of like stability there. So I don't know if you're like you could poke at that Tom.
No, I think that's really adroit. I think that um, you know, what you're pointing to is one of the mm, approaches we use in our shop to define a moat, which is the closer you get to things that pesky human beings invent and do, like HIPAA compliance, for
Yeah,
example. And if
right.
you create proprietary workflow that serves a problem space at that intersection between man and machine, that's
That's cool.
promising, right? That's
Yes.
durable.
Yeah.
I think the
Right.
other thing you touched on, and speaking of Snowflake and data lakes and so on, yeah, as we move to agentic AI, you got to have as much daylight as possible between you and the LLMs because, as you point out,
Your
they're
top.
coming with the stack.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's an unpopular thing to say, but yeah, if OpenAI decides one day, you know what, Cursor, that's my money,
Yeah.
right? Or Anthropic's already on the case.
Right.
Or, I mean, however many hundreds of millions of dollars you've quickly generated, it can go poof really fast. So in our shop, we like to talk with founders about, look, there has to be as much distance as possible that you can preserve over time. And you expect to hear this from me, Mark, because you know how we roll over here. It's got to be through proprietary data that you generate or that can be captured, um, and and not ingested or scraped from any known source,
Yep.
right? Because,
Exactly.
like, speaking of OpenAI, when Microsoft decides, yeah, okay, just ingest GitHub. By the way, it wasn't the letter and spirit, I think, of what open source developers had in mind when they were posting their code in GitHub, but hey, it belongs to Microsoft, so they did it. And boom, right? Cursor and other such possibilities are immediately born. So I don't want to ever be in the business of building a company that depends on data that can just be, you know,
Totally. Yeah.
hit a button
And
and there you
I'll add two more, Tom, to get your feedback on. And I like to talk about these publicly because I like to attract entrepreneurs that share a mindset or on that path. So another hypothesis I have on this in the application layer is the move from system of record to system of action, which I think Bessemer talked about. I call it point of work in parallel with that. Owning the point of work instead of the system of record. And so like what that means is I think the system of record was an extraordinarily powerful moat during the on-prem and cloud movements. If you had the data, you could do everything else around it, the insights, the actions, blah, blah, blah. But I think now it shifts to like where the raw data, unstructured data collection occurs. Right. So like in our world of go to market, I think it's more important to own the transcript between the buyer and the seller than it is to own the CRM data. Because like once you own that, you can do everything else. And like if you translate in the finance world, maybe it's like more about like owning like the contract signatures that have the payment terms and all that stuff, or like how wherever that raw data comes from, if you own that, then you could have the ledger, you can close the books.
totally.
Like on the coding side, I don't know, maybe you can help me with that one. But like I think that the point, and I think that's an entrepreneur, that's an opportunity for the startups. Um, the other one, yeah, I don't know how you react to that. Let me try to think what the other one was. Oh, yeah, the other one real quick was, uh, this is so important right now. There's so much decades rigorous research across every single decade that shows that we overplay first mover advantage. Um, the studies you look at show that 12% of the time the first mover wins and 88% of the time the fast follower wins. And I know the arguments on both sides. Like I think in our world, oh, well, the first mover, that's like the blitz scale mentality. It's like if you're the first to raise the big round, then you'll get the TechCrunch article and then you'll get the best engineers and then the big customers will follow. And there's a decent argument there. And I think like, I think the authors of Blitzscale, is Reid Hoffman and Chris Yee, they found at LinkedIn, which I think in the network effect play like that, absolutely. Like first mover is massive. But like the counter argument there is when you are the first mover, like Google wasn't the first search engine. Um, you know, Internet Explorer wasn't the first browser. Salesforce wasn't the first CRM. Workday wasn't the first. I mean, it's like the list goes on. Now, why does that happen? It's because like when you're the first mover, you have so much required investment that the fast follower doesn't have. Like you're dealing with tech that's like moving, and you know what I mean? Like so many of these AI companies that started before the LLMs were created have to like rebuild everything. You have to evangelize the market. You probably, especially right now, you raised a massive valuation, so you have that overhang. So you have to freeze your ACVs. I mean, that's imagine being a fast follower. You come in like, I can just, they started 4 years ago. I can build the tech from the ground up, knowing what I know today. They already have the answer. Just reverse engineer. It's going to cost me like 5% of what they spent. And they've already evangelized the category. I can literally just say, I'm Acme Company at 90% off. And that's going to be so much easier in this AI era, you know?
Absolutely. Listen, I so completely subscribe there. Early birds get worms, the second mouse gets the cheese. So, and that's really personal for
Yeah.
me. My first company when I was a puppy and I didn't know what I was doing, venture capitalists would ask, "Well, who are your competitors?" And I'd say, "Oh, it's so innovative. We have no competitors." By the way, when I talk to founders and they say that, ding, 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 be alarmed.
Red flag.
Be
Yeah.
careful. The second company, I remember we started, and well, those same pesky venture capitalists would say, as you mentioned Google. Google was the seventh search engine. I'm sure they got it in spades, but Alta Vista, Lycos has this all
Mhm.
bagged up. Move on.
Sure.
We got a ton of that, and
Yep.
I had learned my lesson from the first company. I said, okay, no, we will never step into an arena
Mhm.
without 6, 7, or 8 worthy contenders. To your point, tilling the soil, building the category, training customers how to talk
Beautiful.
about the problem. God bless every single one of those guys, right?
Exactly.
That's
And
the key.
today we have the added advantage is they just raised at a, you know, billion-dollar valuation off of 10 million in revenue. Yeah, every sector goes back to 10x. So they can't drop ACVs, even though the efficiency's there. They have to like grow like crazy with crazy burn multiples to keep trying to grow on that valuation. So it's one more mark against them and one more huge advantage to the fast follower.
And listen, along those lines, the psychology of the CEO who raised at a billion with 10 million in revenue, every single board meeting. I mean, I love it when venture capitalists talk about, yeah, the company just needs to grow into its valuation.
Right.
You're going to those board meetings in the close session, and let's just say you are getting taken to the shed every time if you're not,
So
right?
hard.
And there will be wobbles, there
Yeah.
will be zigs and zags,
Yeah.
of course, right? So it
Yeah.
just creates, I think, a really, and it's okay. Everybody does this because it's hard. Nobody's looking for a drive-through wine country, but that's not useful, right?
Yep.
When those expectations are so out of whack because of a caffeinated valuation you took based on hopes and dreams and too many assumptions.
Totally.
You know.
Exactly.
Hey, Mark, I want to go back to, I remember when you told me that you were going to be teaching at Harvard.
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember this conversation, but I was overjoyed um, because one of my beefs with Harvard Business School in the past was that too many of the HBSers were sort of participating in this reality distortion field where first they're all masters of the universe,
Mhm. Yeah.
at HBS, for Christ's
Yeah.
sake.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember you saying something like, yeah, and I'm teaching the science and of scaling sales.
Yeah.
And you said, yeah, it's kind of blue collar.
Yeah.
That was the word. And you remember I was just psyched. I was dancing
Yeah.
and happy to know that you were bringing something so practical and necessary to a curriculum at HBS with all of the hoity-toity. So
Yeah.
just kind of curious, what's the vibe today? How's that evolved?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's like a massive political vibe that I probably shouldn't go into as much other than like I don't see it from the inside in terms of like discrimination and stuff. And I talk to students of all backgrounds and it's a challenging time on that front, but I'll kind of leave that aside. I will talk about you know, going in there, you think there's this like massive undeserved ego of the students. I don't see that. Yeah, they're just like massive learners. And I think there's probably a little bit of a shift too. Like, I mean, if you look over the course of decades, it was probably a school, and any top tier school is probably full of folks who like grew up with a silver spoon, knew the right people, and you're going to get a concentration of that mentality. And that's far from the truth. I mean, half you have really great diversity. You have to have massive diversity in the MBA program because more learning comes from them debating with each other from different backgrounds than me pontificating about what I know. So like you have to have a massively diverse, and that's like gender, race, it's like where you're from, the industries you worked in, like all the stuff. Like, I think the other shift that's happened since like around '08, actually, during uh, uh, the Great Recession is, you know, a decrease in interest in just standard management consulting and banking, and a massive increase in entrepreneurship. And that's probably partially the reason for my invitation there is their ability, their need to move their faculty and course offerings. And and it's been a pleasure. So the course I teach is founder selling. It's not even, we have other classes that are like you move on to with the scaling. This is pure founder selling, which I'm so excited about. It's literally like class one is how do you run the first meeting, discovery. Class two is how do you give a good demo. Class three is how do you set the first meeting through prospecting. Class four is how do you manage a proof of concept. I mean, it's like raw stuff. Dude, it is like one of the most popular classes. I don't know where it sits. I do know that the dean just ran a study across all first years. There's 900 of them, and asked like, what did you not get in the first year that you need? Number one, sales. Number two was negotiation. Number three was something else. I forget what it was. Like sales, number one. I think 53% of the students. And I've taken this class from the first year I did it. 60 students took it. I had 450 students last year. There's only 900 in each class, 900 in the whole grade, the whole year. 450 took it, and there's still a wait list. So they just love it. And I love the stories coming back because they're going off and like not a lot of them want to go off and carry a bag, but they know that a huge part of being a great founder is you got to sell.
Man, that I think that that is a lot of progress, and I it's so necessary. It is from my vantage point, I was in graduate school for engineering, but I remember taking some classes at the B school at Stanford at the time. It was fun, but it wasn't as practical
No,
at that time as I
no,
feel it needed to be.
no,
Selling, if you can't
totally.
sell a product, you can't be you're certainly not gonna be a CEO or successful anywhere else. Selling is makes the world go round.
Totally. And I have to tell the students, I'm like, because the other class I teach, ironically, is disrupting Silicon Valley with AI. So I bring 50 students out to Silicon Valley every January.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, check your egos at the door, folks. Do not mention that you're MBA. Like, you're not like, it's getting better. And I just like to partially show the valley that like these students are super bright and have a massive contribution to the startup ecosystem. And they've gone off and done it. But that's a really cool trip too, to kind of like integrate stuff that they're doing with like, we're sitting down with like, we're having Dylan Field this year, Yamini at HubSpot, like just sitting down with some really great folks to explore like how they're thinking about AI in the organization. So
That's gotta be really gratifying.
yeah.
Okay, Mark, let's move to our lightning round here. I'm gonna ask you a few quick hitting questions where you just kind of emote, respond, tell me quickly, what you're feeling, what you're thinking about this,
Mm,
okay?
yeah.
All right, let's hit it. What's a portfolio company story that surprised you in the best way because they scale differently than you expected?
Mm. I've been shocked at, I don't know if I can remember one, but I've been shocked at how much the LLM search traffic has been converting into sales, driving meaningful stuff. I didn't think it would happen this fast because I do think like, if you compare it like standard search engine traffic to LLM, I think that LLM hasn't even penetrated 1% yet. but like we're seeing real meaningful revenue contribution. And I think it's just because it's an open territory right now.
Okay, what's a lesson from your time at HubSpot that you still see founders applying successfully today?
I opened the first chapter I wrote was around hiring formula, and I think that it was about coachability. It was one that, like, in terms of you hire for coachability, I'd never heard it before from like my predecessors who I learned from. It was one that I found through a regression analysis of like my failures and successes in hiring. And I just hear it everywhere now. So I don't know if like I was a pioneer around it, but I'm glad. And I think it checks out, and I continue to use it with founders today.
Okay, one sentence you'd put on your when to scale
I
billboard.
wrote it down when I saw that one. Um, it's when you have when you have consistent, predictable customer success creation, not predictable, consistent revenue creation. That's where people mess up.
Yes, that
You
is,
like that one, right?
I like that.
As
And
an
that one
investor.
resonates. Okay, reflecting on your time at HBS, is the classroom easier or harder than a startup boardroom?
Generally harder. Now, of course, all startup boardrooms are tricky. I did not like going in front of General Cast and Sequoia at HubSpot when we missed by 20%. Those were rough. So it depends who's there, but generally speaking, it's really challenging in the classroom. The expectation at HBS is extraordinarily high. And again, like I said, like your expectation as a professor is not to teach them based on what you know, but extract the amazing brain power in the room. So I have to know that, Tom, worked at GM and grew up in Indiana and studied philosophy at school. And Mary worked at Google and is working on a startup in XYZ, and she's from India. And I need to like, when a thing comes up, I need to be like, so you lived through that. What do you think? It's freaking
Mm,
hard.
yeah.
And they challenge me all the time, which is what I love. That's why the science of scale methodology has gotten so tight, is they just came up to me like, I grew up in Nigeria and I created a water purification business. And this is the question I have about that business context with the science of scale. And it's like, wow, that makes it rigorous.
No doubt. No doubt. All right. So last one here. If AI is shaking everything up, what's one non-AI skill you would still bet on or wish you had?
Creativity. I just think like that's the last one. The basic premise of AI, of course, there's inference, the concept of inference, but it's like knowing everything and then spitting out the answer kind of based on what we know. But the like neurology and science behind creativity, that's I think AI will create, but I also think humans will create at the same level, and that's how we will coexist. Whether that's music, writing, startup ideas, whatever.
I certainly agree. I
And
certainly
I
agree.
guess I'll throw one more in too. I
Yeah.
do I do have a lot of conviction, Tom, on the one job that AI should not do. Government official.
Uh, now you just put this dystopian thing in my head. I'm visualizing me in front of an AI judge when I was speeding again.
Yeah.
And
Maybe
the
that's okay because it's I don't know, but like leading the country, that gets concerning.
yeah. Well, on that nervous making note, let's let's wrap it up here. Many thanks, Mark, for joining. This was really, really fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. I'll just do like two quick plugs if I could, like then you because you're part of them. Just look to us with Stage 2 Capital. We're the only VC running back by 1,000 CROs, CMOs, CCOs, and general practitioners like Tom out there. We invested the seed stage. And then check out the Science of Scaling book. It comes out in February. It's on pre-order right now. And as I mentioned prior, um, it is the underlying methodology for stage 2, but I'm also donating 100% of the proceeds to McLean Hospital, who is the leading institution in the world around mental health, a topic that's very important to me. So thank you for that airtime.
Absolutely, Mark. Well, to all the listeners, if you haven't subscribed yet and want a regular stream, hit the subscribe button in your favorite podcast app or follow us on YouTube. Many thanks again, Mark. Great to have you today. Until the next time, keep building, keep cranking.